Assalamu alaikum. Today we are going to start another lecture that is regarding to the regulation of hormones receptor. Regulation of hormones receptor. What is the regulation of hormone receptors? Are that includes feedback mechanism regulates circulating levels of the hormones, usually by negative feedback. Feedback is regulated by the negative feedback. So all the circulating hormone levels are important. They are not the only determinant of the response of the target tissues. To respond, the target tissues must possess specific receptors that recognize the hormone. Those receptors are coupled to cellular mechanisms that produce the psychologic response. So, for the feedback, we need hormones that trigger out the target points and regulation of the hormones to activate the receptors that are required to activate some level. Okay, does hormone responsible for the relationship and hormone sensitivity? So, thus responsive of the target tissue to hormone is expressed in the dose-response relationship, in which the magnitude of the response is correlated with the hormone concentration. So, hormone is triggered out by the receptor. So, here dose response relationship is activated by the magnitude of the how much hormone is concentrated. So response will be as the hormone is concentration actually lies. So more concentration of hormones, or means more hormones are present, so the more response or more targeted cells are targeted, and response is more. As the hormone concentration increases, the response usually increases and then levels off. So it means that the hormone increases, the response ratio will be also increases. It is directly proportional. So for the in other words, we can say that the response can be induced, can be increased out by the concentration. Sensitivity is defined the hormone concentration that produces 50% of the maximal response. If more hormone is required to produce 50% of the maximal response, then there has been a decrease in the sensitivity of the target. So sensitivity is the hormone concentration that produces 50% of the maximal response. So 50% of the maximal response, then there has been a decrease in the sensitivity of the target tissue. If less hormone is required, there has been an increase in the sensitivity of the target tissue. So the less hormone when required, sensitivity will also increase. So sensitivity means to produce 50% of the maximum response, means it is sensitive to the hormone. So less activity, less concentration of the hormone receptor as well required. Down regulation versus up regulation. There are two regulations. One is down regulation, or the responsiveness, or up regulation of the hormone activity. The responsiveness or sensitivity of the target tissue can be changed into one or two ways. There are two ways. By changing the number of receptors, we can regulate the activity of the hormone. By changing the affinity of the receptors of the hormone, we can also trigger out or change out the activity of the regulation of hormone. The greater the number of receptors for the hormone, the greater the maximal response. Okay, that's the same as the concentration also increases, so the hormone activity may also increases. The higher the affinity of the receptor for the hormone, the greater will be the response. A change in the number of affinity of receptors is called down regulation or up regulation. By the help of receptors, that the activity we are naming here is the down regulation and the up regulation. Down regulation means the number of receptors or the affinity of the receptors for the hormone has been decreased, so the hormone activity may also decreases by the down regulation, you can say also. Upregulation means that the number or the affinity of the receptors has increased by the concentration of the targeted cells may change. The upregulation may occur. As in the case of upregulation, their amount will be increased. Hormones may down regulate or upregulate their own receptors in target tissues and even may regulate receptors for the other hormones as well. That's another point. So we will discuss here now the downregulation in detail. Downregulation is a mechanism in which a hormone decreases the number of or affinity of receptors in the target cells, target tissues. So number may decreases or affinity may also decreases. The downregulation may occur. Downregulation may occur by decreasing the synthesis of the new receptors, by increasing the degradation of the existing receptors, by inactivating receptors. The purpose of the downregulation, how downregulation may occur by the synthesis of the new receptors as hormone will act for the new receptors. So its regulation may decrease out. Older hormones will lowers down their activity. So it's the point by increasing the degradation of the existing receptors. If the receptors may decrease, so the hormonal activity may also affect it in the form of, if there are in less numbers, so the activity may be lesser. By the inactivating receptor, if the receptors are inactivated, so the activity may also decreases. The purpose of the down regulation, what is the purpose of down regulation, is to reduce the sensitivity of the target tissues when hormones levels are high for an extended period of time. So sensitivity may be targeted out by the receptors by the activity of downregulation. A downregulation occurs the response of the hormones declines there, although hormone levels remain high. Okay, an example is downregulation is effect of progesterone on its own receptors in the uterus. Progesterone acts through the progesterone receptor to direct physiological adaptation of the uterus in preparation of the completion of pregnancy. So downregulation is the in the progesterone level. So how it acts by the diagrammatically we will discuss here. Hypothalamus will be acted by the aid of the hormone, that is gonadotropin hormone. GnRH induce release out on the and act on the pituitary gland, that is releases two hormones, that are follicle stimulating hormone FSH and luteinizing hormone, that is LH. That is these are acting on the ovaries, then ovar produces an estrogen and progesterone level may increase. These are released in the pelvic cavity, but the hypothalamus and pituitary lies, as we are already know about that they lie in the brain. So in the graphically you can also see them when the level of the receptors may increases, the hormonal activity may also increases. How downregulation may also done in the T3 triiodothyronine. We will discuss now about Down syndrome. Down regulation can also refer to a hormone effect on receptors for the related hormones. So this type of down regulation is illustrated in by the progesterone. In the uterus, progesterone down regulates on receptor and down regulates the receptor of the estrogen. So it is regulated by the progesterone in this activity. Second example is triiodothyronine, that is T3 level decreases. Sensitivity of thyroid in TRH also receptors, that is actually on the pituitary, in the pituitary anterior pituitary, they affect hypothalamus responsive to the hypothalamus pituitary activity. So the hypothalamus activity may be affected by it. So upregulation, Upregulation of a receptor. Here we see how they are acting in the T3 regulation activity, like we have already discussed in above picture. We also studying here that how the T3 acting by the down regulation. So upregulation of the receptors is a mechanism in which a hormone increases the number of affinity of our receptors. Upregulation may occur by the increasing that all the points of that are opposite to the down regulation, by increasing the sizes of the new receptors, decreasing the degradation, so activating the receptors, and prolactin level increases by it, growth hormone increases, as skeletal muscle also increases, estrogen level that may also increase in the female. Upregulation hormone can also regulate the receptors of the other hormones, as estrogen not upregulated in the receptor of uterus, and then LH, then ovaries. That is all about upregulation and downregulation in the regulation of the hormone receptors.